Animation didn't work. Anyway, Asylum and Reality, discussion on mental health. So I read The Quickening Maze by Adam Foulds. So the prologue. The Quickening Maze starts out with this very paleonastic scenery of verdant fields and blazingly yellow meadows as they merge into this forest with a thickening canopy. And it's following this boy. The boy, he wanders through the forest. He's supposed to be picking up wood for fire. He's wandering through the forest and he forgets himself. He loses himself into the obscurity of the night. And by the time he realizes he's lost, he decides that he can't find his way back. So he's making his way back home, but when he sees his village, it's not the same village. It's not recognizable. Because of his experience, he's changed. The Quickening Maze is a historical fiction. The small boy, his name was John, turns out to be the peasant poet of the 19th century, John Clare. As a reasoning for there's a lack of proportioning for chapters. It's split up into seasons. This is because when John's a young boy, he finds himself enthralled by a version of Seasons, which is a book of poetry, and it goes in autumn, winter, spring, and summer. And while the story takes place over 3 years, you're first introduced to new characters with no name. The characters are introduced by their thoughts and behaviors prior to their names, and so you learn who they are by their actions. So the first character you meet is Abigail Allen, and the other characters of Insight are managed less by their names, alternatively by their behaviors and thoughts. The novel presents first, after Abigail, Dr. Matthew Allen, Hannah Allen, a young and yet to be distinguished Alfred Tennyson, John Clare, and Margaret, who is an inmate alongside of the other individuals of mental deterioration. Matthew Allen is the lead operating practitioner of mental studies at the asylum where the story takes place, is pictured there, around which many of the action, the entire story is really just encompassed in the forest of the asylum, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So Hannah Allen is his second daughter at the age of 17 and is utilized to bridge the gap of the mental institution with that of the young and unestablished Alfred Tennyson, who, although his brother Septimus is currently in the asylum for his morbidity, Alfred is still distant and he doesn't really go to the asylum often. So Hannah's role is really to bring him into the fold of the story, to show an old poet, so John Clare, who's degenerating, and a young poet who's really just starting and trying to figure out his course in the poetic world. Margaret, in many ways, is the end of the journey. Her mind is already decomposed into that of the comportment of its own choosing, contrary to the understood reality. So at first, you're lost. You're attempting to piece together strings of thought to define each character. The major themes of the story are freedom and illusion. Throughout the novel, the patients are perceived as inmates seeking freedom, while the children of the doctor also seek normalcy and freedom from the constricting bonds of the asylum as their entire life. The illusions then come into play, so to speak, as the story revolves around the mental stability of those in the convolution of characters. This becomes glaringly apparent with the further instability of mental health over the course of the book. For instance, Matthew Allen fails as if comes out that he's a fraud. While John Clare, momentarily regains his mental stability when pressed with violations toward the patients. Rather, Matthew Allen decides to neglect his work at the asylum to enterprise a new business, a machine that he's come up with. In turn, Foulds records that freedom can be achieved only through sanity regarding the possible. So, in terms of Allen, his machine was impossible at the time. So he falls from sanity. While on the other hand, Clare gains a moment of sanity because what he can do is possible. Nevertheless, Foulds also questions the solidity of mental health with serious candor, never allowing for insanity to be mistaken for artistic enlightenment. As the story ends, each character falls aside, and only John is left. The asylum is left behind, as is the forest. The forest surrounding the asylum is reminiscent of that of John's childhood. By the time John makes his way back home, to his family, to his grown children, he's not the same person, and he again loses his mind. The maze is never ending, although variable to experience. This is a continuing of exchanging of cogs until there's little left of the original individual, of innocence. And the reason that this book is so important for even a classroom experience is that it goes into reasoning of how mental health studies often placate themselves on what they've already found. Sure, we know these people have deteriorated mentally, that they're not stable anymore, but there's so much more to know. Allen is a perfect example of this. He says, well, I figured out everything that I can, and so I'm going to fill my time with something new. I'll let my attendees take care of my asylum, and I will make myself wealthy. And even today, mental health studies aren't that comprehensive. What we know of the brain is about 10%, and as a result, our mental health care in the United States and around the world is greatly lacking.